At around the beginning of the summer in western Japan comes the rainy season. It is driven by prevailing winds that bring in clouds and moisture for many weeks prior to the hot summer months. The timing and duration of this rainy season is perfect for farmers, but seems endlessly long for astrophotographers. In the last 6 weeks, I believe there were only 2 nights suitable for imaging. And this video adventure comes from one of those rare nights in mid-June. Surprisingly and fortuitously, that night was a new moon, allowing me to take advantage of darker skies to try some Milky Way photography. So I decided once again to travel west of my home in Yokohama and south of Mount Fuji to the Izu Peninsula. As usual, my journey begins at Yokohama Station, where this time I took the Tokaido Line train to Atami and then transferred to the local Izukyu line for the final leg. This time, instead of traveling all the way down to the southern tip of the peninsula, I planned to stay around the city and district called Ito. Ito is located on the northeastern side of Izu in Shizuoka Prefecture. Similar to Shimoda, it also has about Bortle Class 4 skies. Other areas of Izu are darker, such as the central area and the southwest side of the peninsula, but there are no trains running in that direction. It is much less convenient to visit or live there. From Atami Station onward, the ocean views on the left and the rugged terrain on the right are a beautiful sight. For your information, my objective on this trip is multifold. First, to explore this new location for suitability as a deep sky imaging site. Second, to get more experience with my new Canon EOS R8 mirrorless camera. And third, to meet up with an American friend who is the founder of a Tokyo-based ET contact group for organizing CE5 events at dark sky locations. Our rendezvous destination for this afternoon was Kawana Station, and the planned viewing and contact site was nearby on the slopes of Komuroyama. Its name means Small Mountain. There's no particular meaning to the word Muro in this context. Komuroyama is one of several volcanic cones created a few 100,000 years ago in the local area that rises abruptly, creating a natural viewing high ground. Neither my friend Mark nor I have ever been to this place before. We expected it to be rather quiet and remote, and certainly the tiny little Kawana train station supported that suspicion. Our first order of business was to catch a shuttle bus and check into the Southern Cross Resort Hotel and Golf Facility. Catering mostly to golfers, this resort was well maintained with lots of great amenities, but perhaps a bit past its heyday, as are most golf resorts in Japan, which sprung up like weeds before the last millennium during the Japanese economic boom. I'll let you enjoy a few photos of the Southern Cross Resort property before we next venture to the astrophotography imaging site.
When you see the Southern Cross for the first time, you understand now why you came this way. 'Cause the truth you might be running from is so small, but it's as big as the promise of a coming day. So I'm sailing for tomorrow, my dreams are a dying.
We had a beautiful northern view, including Mount Fuji in the distance out the window of the hotel room. Although it is not evident here, Komuro Mountain has a rather broad base covering many square kilometers and is only about 1 kilometer from the ocean. What you see here is simply the final 100 meters that can be accessed by walking or using a rinky-dink single-person chairlift to the top. The mountain is less than a half a kilometer from the Southern Cross Resort, but separated by the golf course and peripheral fences. So we decided to take a taxi ride around the edge of the course to the Komuroyama rest house and walk up from there. Surprisingly, this park has no closing time, so it is okay to stay throughout the night. We expected the summit to have lighting and be less private, so our plans were to set up the equipment in the Dinosaur Plaza Children Play Area. It had a large open field at an elevation of 265 meters with clear views to the east and south, ideal for Milky Way photography. The hike to the Dinosaur Plaza was at least half a kilometer with too many stairs to cover another 50 or 60 meters of elevation. That does not sound so bad, but with nearly 26 kilograms or 57 pounds of equipment, it was a physical challenge for this senior body.
So we cheated and we lied and we tested.
The imaging site we selected was adequate with plush green grass and good views, but there was absolutely no level area. Everywhere had a rather steep slope that was not exactly ideal for picnic chairs or tripods. Not to mention that night, the gusty wind turned out to be far worse than forecasted, lasting the entire time we were there. In this photo, off in the distance, you can see Komuroyama, which means Big Komuro Mountain. Its slopes are burned once per year to keep it free of trees and to allow one to view its incredibly symmetrical natural cone-shaped structure. It is substantially higher as well. After stashing our gear in the weeds to hide it, we decided to hike the final 55 meters to the top of Komuroyama to catch a view from the summit. We reached the top before 7 p.m. and had a magnificent view of Mount Fuji to the northwest and the setting sun just to its left. This is a photo of Mark and myself at the moment of sunset with the rough terrain of Izu and Mount Fuji behind us. Later, back at Dinosaur Plaza, here is Mark setting up the CE5 contact circle in the distance. In case you are wondering, that particular night was uneventful according to my standards, which occasionally happens. But I had participated in a few of these events before and actually have observed some surprising and unexplainable things. In fact, it was through Mark's group that I first focused my attention on the night sky, ultimately leading to my current obsession with astrophotography. This is a look at the rig that I was using that night. I attached a camera ball mount to a long Vixen dovetail bar and also mounted the ASI Air Plus behind the Canon R8 camera on that same Vixen bar. In addition, I attached the Askar FMA135 astrograph lens together with an ASI 678 MC planetary camera to the side of the AM5 mounting plate and used that for polar alignment. During the Milky Way photography, I found that it was possible to use the Askar setup for some simultaneous deep sky imaging. The trick was to point the Askar scope to a Milky Way target of interest and then simply adjust the Canon camera on its ball joint to capture a nice field of view of the entire Milky Way. The Canon camera snapped images independently, and I operated the ASI 678 MC camera using the ASI Air controller. This proved to be an imaging bonus situation, a double-barrel approach that I did not originally anticipate, and it worked fine. However, the position of the Askar imaging train mounted on the side of the AM5 mounting plate was worrisome, as you may know, potentially hazardous for the equipment, so I monitored it frequently to avoid any mishap. Here is one of the first test photos that I took soon after sunset, looking to the southeast. The lights you see are ships on the water and a view across 30 to 40 kilometers of ocean to the island of Oshima. A bit later into the night, when true darkness arrived, I repositioned the Canon R8 camera to avoid the horizon and capture only the Milky Way using the same parameter settings. This first image is an unedited single frame followed by the same photo processed conservatively and then processed more aggressively. If you recall, in my previous Astrophotography Japan YouTube episode 17 titled Canon EOS R8 First Light, I actually snapped some photos under the Bortle Class 7 Plus skies of Yokohama. Here is a comparison using the same ISO settings and f-stop, but radically different exposure times. Take a look at the sensor saturation you get in Yokohama compared to the Bortle Class 4 skies here in Izu near Ito. The Yokohama photos on the left were only 10-second exposures, and the Izu images on the right are tracked 30-second exposures. The difference in sky darkness conditions are quite remarkable. In both cases shown here, no filters were used during the imaging. From about 8:30 p.m. to about 9:30 p.m., I collected 30-second images of the Milky Way. One of those images, a single frame, is shown here. According to Stellarium, the R8 full-frame sensor, using a 35mm focal length lens, captures a sky image with dimensions of 54 degrees 26 minutes by 37 degrees 51 minutes. Simultaneously, with the Milky Way imaging, I also focused my Askar scope on M24, the Small Sagittarius Star Cloud. Its position in the Milky Way image is shown in the small red box. It is a highly visible structure in all Milky Way photos and happens to be about the perfect size for the Askar Lens 678 MC planetary camera combination. This is the full-sized processed image of 50 minutes exposure time at gain setting 195 with no filter at 135mm focal length. The 678 MC camera was operating at 23 to 25 degrees centigrade during the imaging session. This is the first time I ever captured this particular deep sky object. I stacked the FITS files in Deep Sky Stacker, processed in GIMP, and used StarNet++ and Topaz denoise for the image processing. The stars are a tiny bit oblong, but overall I am quite happy with this image. M24 is about 600 light-years wide, occupying almost 2 degrees by 1 degree of sky. It is distantly located about 10 to 16,000 light-years away from Earth on the Sagittarius spiral arm of our galaxy. It is simply a unique region of sky in the Milky Way plain where the high density of distant stars and dust shine through unobstructed. After spending an hour of imaging time on M24, I repositioned the mount to next center on another extremely bright region around M8, the Lagoon Nebula. The small blue box shows that region, and from about 10:30 until after 11 p.m., I managed to capture 30 minutes of quality images, again, 30-second exposures using exactly the same parameter settings that I used for the Small Sagittarius Star Cloud. This was with no filter. M8 is a hydrogen emission nebula region giving birth to stars about 4,100 light-years distant from Earth. It is one of the brightest nebulae in the sky, shining around magnitude 6. The massive stars embedded within the nebula give off enormous amounts of ultraviolet radiation, ionizing the gas and causing it to shine brightly. It spans about 110 by 50 light-years in space and appears 90 arc minutes by 40 arc minutes in our nighttime skies. This image was processed the same way as previously described. And here is the starless version obtained from StarNet++. The amount of nebulosity in this region of sky is quite remarkable, as shown in this image containing only 30 minutes of integrated data. Here is a photo showing the bright stars Deneb and Satyr in the center. This photo is not particularly interesting except for the small meteor that I captured in the upper left side of the image. I think it is a meteor because it was after midnight and satellites are usually only visible around sunset or sunrise. This is also a tracked 30-second exposure, but this section of the Milky Way is not quite as bright as the Sagittarius arm where we were imaging earlier. And also, this image is looking northward over the light dome of the nearby town of Ito. One of my inspirations from this night of imaging was the realization that I could easily do a double-barrel imaging approach with the equipment that I possessed. I already described the layout, which worked fine, but was not ideally designed. The following week, while organizing this video, I created a better contraption for the next outing when I plan to also image with two cameras. Here's the base that I created, using an Mania dual accessory adapter. I changed out the Mini Vixen clamps for more robust clamps that accept either a Mini Vixen or standard sized bar. And I attached the whole thing to another Vixen bar that can clamp directly into my AM5 mounting plate. You can see that this new design is capable of securely holding my Canon R8 camera and the Askar astrograph setup on the top of the mount away from harm's way. I even have the Askar attached to my ASI 533 MC Pro cooled color camera with a 2-inch filter drawer in line. I'm really looking forward to giving this a try on my next summertime adventure. I suppose perhaps at this point you are wondering about my stacked images of the Milky Way. Well, that leads me to lessons learned from this astrophotography imaging adventure. Indeed, I had almost 3 hours of images taken while tracking with the AM5 mount. No guiding. But that was my biggest disappointment of the night. It seems that I still am not quite familiar enough with my Canon EOS R8 camera. I got a hell of a lot of photos, but the camera was accidentally set for JPEG and not RAW image files. Actually, this was not an oversight. I specifically tried to set it for RAW images, but clearly I misunderstood the stupid icons and menu system. I need to study them more closely again. Also, I have to admit that bouncing back and forth between imaging and CE5 activities that night, I did not do enough checking and verifying and concentrating on the camera settings. I am sure you know that this hobby is rather complex and demanding of complete attention lest you suffer the consequences, which I did. Another thing that I learned was regarding the polar alignment and tracking. As you saw, my tripod was on a severe incline. I tried my best to level it and set it up stably, but I was seeing a little bit of oblongness to the stars in the Askar images. I know a little bit of unlevelness can be compensated for in active guiding, so it is usually not a big deal, but without guiding like tonight, does an unlevel mount directly affect the star tracking? Intuitively, I suspect it may. So paying closer attention to using level ground and accurately leveling the mount may be warranted. Especially so if I elect not to employ guiding during these wide-field imaging sessions. Also, in retrospect, I think it would have been good to experiment with the ISO settings. Compared to photos from the best Milky Way imaging experts on YouTube, I think my ISO setting was probably too low. I used ISO 500, which should not matter if the Canon EOS R8 is ISO invariant in design. But regardless, I think taking a series of test images under various ISO conditions is a good idea to better understand the R8 camera and find optimal settings. Frankly, these general-purpose mirrorless cameras are so much more complicated than the simple astro-dedicated imaging cameras, aren't they? And finally, after looking at the single-exposure non-processed images, I can make some comments about the Canon RF 35mm f1.8 lens suitability for astrophotography. Similar to all economical priced prime focus lenses, it displays some aberrations at low f-stop ratios. I had it set for the lowest at f1.8. Toward the corners, the stars display a deformed shape resembling a flying bird, which is a symptom of optical astigmatism. The brighter stars toward the corners also show some chromatic aberration as well. However, I think the central 75% of the image is essentially free from any noticeable optical aberrations. Well, this particular evening, the sky-seeing conditions were fantastic, and there were no clouds until well after midnight. And although the temperature was not cold, the strong wind was definitely making us feel quite chilled. So we began to pack things up before 1 a.m. to head back to the Southern Cross Resort. On the way back, we retraced our steps through Dinosaur Plaza and back down to the Komuroyama guest house and beyond. It was too late to call a taxi, so our only option was to walk. But there was no way we were going to walk the long way around the golf course on the city streets carrying all that equipment. Proactively, my friend Mark explored Google Earth images and discovered that there was a shortcut path or road that led from the Komuroyama parking area across a few fairways over to the golf course access road. It appeared to be blocked by a gate, but it seemed like the only reasonable option. Unfortunately, the gate was a bit tall, but on the left and right, the fence was much smaller, only about 3 feet tall. It was something we could easily climb over, assuming, of course, we could safely negotiate the electrified blue wires that were positioned on the exterior side, just in front of the short chain-link fence. For your information, electrified wires around golf courses in the countryside are common to mostly keep out wild boars that roam the mountains and can be a hazard for golfers and a destructive nuisance for golf course maintenance. Well, it was not too difficult to grab onto a nearby overhanging tree branch, hoist myself up with 1 foot on top of the chain link, straddle the electrified wire, and jump over to the other side. My thick-soled, high-topped hiking boots gave me a little extra confidence that I was not going to get zapped. From there, we just walked across the golf course back up to the resort hotel before 1:30 a.m. The whole ordeal covered about 1.5 kilometers, but with 26 kilograms to carry, well, you get the picture. I was exhausted, and unfortunately the public bath did not open until 6:30 a.m. the next morning. It seems that each location I explore for astrophotography offers new challenges and interesting experiences. Clearly, I enjoy documenting these trips and the imaging results to share with my future self and anyone else like you curious about travel, culture, and deep sky imaging in Japan. I do realize some of my videos, like this one, occasionally chronicle a few missteps or failures or somewhat average results, but that is part of a learning process that I feel is ultimately improving my skills and may help you avoid similar problems. Nevertheless, I got a few good images and some good ideas for the next time, and most importantly, it was a lot of fun. I hope you also vicariously enjoyed the adventure. I sincerely appreciate your interest in Astrophotography Japan. And until next time, here's wishing you clear skies and time to enjoy it. My name is Paul Cheesegel, and I am an astrophotographer.